Hello, good evening. You are watching Politics Insights with me, Ibrahim Umar Wase. Tonight, the world tremble under the weight of two explosive decisions. One from Washington, the other from Bogotá, both sending shockwave through global politics. In South America, history has just been rewritten in a move that stunned the international community. Colombia, one of America's oldest allies, has severed all diplomatic ties with the United States. And as tension flares abroad, America itself is battling an international storm. President Trump has signed National Security Presidential Memorandum number 7, declaring Black Lives Matters and Antifa as domestic terrorist organizations. Two nations, two crises, both redefining the meaning of power, protest, and politics in our time. All these and more coming up right here on DDM Politics Inside. Stay tuned, we will be right back after the break. Alright, welcome back. Tonight, a stunning diplomatic earthquake in the Americas, Colombia, cut off all relations with the United States. But the reason why may not be what you think. Just weeks ago, during the United Nations General Assembly in New York, Colombian President Gustavo Petro has reportedly asked to leave the US. Why? Because of his unwavering support for Palestine.
Este es mi último discurso como presidente aquí, ya es el cuarto.
Hoy, Naciones Unidas ve su crisis y la necesidad de su transformación. Aquí se reúnen estados-nación que ya no tienen poder, que por mucho que voten no se les hace caso, se hace cómplice del genocidio. Este recinto es testigo mudo y cómplice de un genocidio en el mundo de hoy. Trump no habla de democracia, no habla de crisis climática, no habla de vida, solo amenaza y mata y deja matar a decenas de miles. No hay raza superior, señores. No hay pueblo elegido de Dios.
And a bold speech he gave at a pro-Palestinian rally in New York that angered both Israel and Washington. But what happened next turned diplomatic tension into open hostility. Yesterday, the US military, under the orders from President Donald Trump, bombed a Colombian boat in the Eastern Pacific, a vessel carrying Colombian citizens. According to the Trump administration, the strike targeted a narco-trafficking vessel allegedly tied to terrorist organization smuggling fentanyl into the United States. Secretary of War Peter Hedges justified the attack, calling it part of a broader campaign to fight America's deadly fentanyl crisis. He posted this statement on his official account. At the direction of President Trump, the Department of War carried out a lethal strike on a vessel operated by a designated terrorist organization. The 3 male narco-terrorists aboard were killed. These strikes will continue day by day. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio had a much more fiery response for critics worried about America blowing up boats in international waters.
Well, I mean, the question is, bottom line, these are drug boats. If people want to stop seeing drug boats blow up, stop sending drugs to the United States.
Does it matter if it's in the United States?
Well, these are all in international waters. The boat.
Do a strike in the United States, or if
well, that's a different matter. Now you're talking about a law enforcement matter. In this particular case, there are people traveling on international waters headed towards the United States with hostilities in mind, which includes flooding our country with dangerous, deadly drugs, and they're going to be stopped. And that's what's happening. And in the case last week, you saw there was a submarine. It was a submarine. It was a submersible. That's a drug boat all the way through. We know what these boats are. The president just said it. We track them from the very beginning. We know who's on them, who they are, where they're coming from, what they have on them. If you're running drug boats, you're in grave danger.
Wow, that's strong. But not everyone in Washington is cheering. Lawmakers like Rand Paul and Adam Schiff are warning this could violate the US Constitution, arguing the president cannot authorize military attacks without congressional approval. And in typical Trump fashion, he fired back, saying, quote, "I will notify Congress later. We have to do it to save lives." Please take a look.
Legal authority if they do come.
Yes, we do. We have legal authority, right? We're allowed to do that. And if we do by land, we may go back to Congress. But we have, this is a national security problem. They killed 300,000 people last year, these drugs coming in. They killed 300,000 Americans last year, and that gives you legal authority. We have a national security, really, I will say this, when you look at the people we're dealing with, and we know them, we know the people coming in, we know the boats, we know everything else, we're allowed to do it. It's in international waters. If we don't do it, we're going to lose hundreds of thousands of people. Now, they'll be coming in by land a little bit more because they're not coming in by boat anymore. There are no boats in the water. There are no more boats. We know the boat almost immediately. You know, it's pretty unusual when you see somebody with a fishing rod and 5 engines on the back of the boat. You know, you don't need that to go fishing. Wait. And we will hit them very hard when they come in by land. And they haven't experienced that yet, but now we're totally prepared to do that. We'll probably go back to Congress and explain exactly what we're doing when we come to the land.
But here's the catch. The Constitution doesn't require the president to notify the Congress. It requires him to get permission first. In retaliation, Washington officially cut off all aid and threats with Colombia, accusing President Gustavo Petro of being, quote, an illegal drug leader. And in a stunning move, Colombia responded by severing all diplomatic relations with the United States, recalling its ambassador and closing communication channels indefinitely. The Colombian government says it now views recent U.S. statements as threats of invasion. Analysts say Colombia is now preparing for possible conflict. Neighboring Venezuela is also on high alert. President Nicolas Maduro, a long-time adversary of Trump, says Venezuelan vessels have also been attacked under this same U.S. campaign. And Maduro did not mince words, announcing his country has 5,000 Russian surface-to-air missiles ready to counter what he called American aggression. From Bogotá to Caracas, the tension is palpable and the hemisphere is holding its breath. If the rhetoric continues, the world could be watching the birth of a new Cold War, this time in Latin America. For now, the US insists it's fighting terrorism and drugs. Colombia insists it's fighting for sovereignty and dignity. But between these two, peace, at least for now, has sucked beneath the wave of the Pacific. The story is still developing. Stay with us here on Politics Inside tonight as we track every move in this fast-evolving crisis. Coming up next is President Trump declaring BLM, Black Lives Matter, and Antifa as domestic terrorist organization, and ordering a full-scale crackdown on them. How will that affect national security and rule of law in the United States? Stay with us. This is still Politics Inside. Welcome back. In a bombshell move from Washington that is already shaking America's political and social foundation, President Donald Trump has just signed National Security Presidential Memorandum No. 7, officially designating Black Lives Matter, BLM, and Antifa as domestic terrorist organization. Under this memorandum, Trump has directed all U.S. federal law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and the newly restructured Department of War to carry out a full-scale crackdown on what the administration calls radical groups destabilizing the nation. Take a look.
Lastly, sir, this is a presidential memorandum on countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence. In recent weeks, months, and years, we've seen a tremendous upsurge in some highly visible, but also other acts of domestic terrorism and organized political violence being perpetrated by radical, politically motivated groups all over the country. What this presidential memorandum will do is set off an administration-wide response to that, ranging from the Joint Terrorism Task Forces to other components of the Department of Justice, to the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Treasury. We're looking at interdicting these groups, preventing them from performing acts of violence, and also looking at sources of organization and funding and support that prop them up and allow them to do the acts that they have been doing.
We're looking at the funders of a lot of these groups, and you know, when you see the signs, and they're all beautiful signs made professionally, these aren't your protesters that make the sign in their basement late in the evening because they really believe it. These are anarchists and agitators, professional anarchists and agitators, and they get hired by wealthy people, some of whom I know, I guess, you know, I probably know them. And you wouldn't know it. You're at dinner with them, everything's nice, and then you find out that they funded millions of dollars to these lunatics. Steve, could you say a couple of words?
Yes, Mr. President. This is a very historic and significant day. This is the first time in American history that there is an all-of-government effort to dismantle left-wing terrorism, to dismantle Antifa, to dismantle the organizations that have been carrying out these acts of political violence and terrorism. What we have seen, if you look at whether it be going back to the riots that started with Black Lives Matter and all the way through to the Antifa riots, the attacks on ICE officers, the doxing campaigns, and now the political assassinations, these are not lone, isolated events. This is part of an organized campaign of radical left terrorism. It is structured, it is sophisticated, it is well-funded, it is well-planned. There is really no parallel like this to anything else in the country right now. There is an entire system of feeder organizations that provide money, resources, weapons, and when they're attacking ICE officers, they're attacking federal buildings, or they're isolating public officials for harassment, doxing, intimidation, and ultimately attempted assassination. It is all carefully planned, executed, and thought through. It is terrorism on our soil. Because of this executive order, Cash and Pam are going to have the tools they need, working with Scott, to take these organizations apart piece by piece. And the central hub of that effort is going to be the Joint Terrorism Task Force, or JTTF, which sits inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But for those at home who are worried about terrorism in this country, they need to understand, because of President Trump's strength, because of his vision, because of his leadership, we are now going to use the entire force of the federal government to uproot these organizations root and branch. And again, that's only possible because of President Trump and his leadership.
Strong words, and they are already drawing fire. Critics say labeling domestic activism movements as terrorist organization could open the door to mass surveillance, arbitrary arrests, and civil rights violation. Within minutes of the announcement, protests erupted in several U.S. cities, including Chicago, Atlanta, and Portland, as demonstrators accused Trump of weaponizing the term terrorism for political gain. Supporters of the move, however, argue it's long overdue, saying the nation has endured years of unrest, arson, and attacks on police officers under the banner of activism. White House officials say the memorandum gives the government authority to freeze assets, crack communications, and ban travels for individuals linked to groups deemed as threats to national security. But legal experts, including members of the ICLU and Congregational Democrats, are warning this could set a dangerous precedent, effectively criminalizing political dissent. Several civil rights groups have already vowed to challenge the order in court, calling it a blatant violation of the First Amendment.
Donald Trump's a broken man. He's trying to break this country. Everybody knows that. But to see people in positions of power and influence do absolutely nothing when they must know better and I believe they do nothing, boy, they're going to have a lot to reconcile at the pearly gates.
The political fallout could be massive. Already, polls show deep division, with some Americans cheering Trump's tough stance, while others see it as the death of protest freedom in America. Whether this move strengthens national security or silence democracy remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: America has entered a new and volatile chapter in its political history. Tonight we have seen power tested on two fronts: abroad, where Colombia dares to defy Washington, and at home, where America confronts its own divisions. Two stories, one lesson: power without restraint always invites rebellion. I am Ibrahim Umar Wase, and this is Politics Insight on Diaspora Digital Media. Good night, and remember, in politics, silence is never neutral.